This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. It's great to have you along with us. Thanks for joining us. And as I say every month, if you haven't already listened to part one of our chat with Jason, it's definitely worth checking that out first. Jason's well known around the sailing world for his boat building, but we also wanted to talk about his very impressive sailing career. So if you've not listened to him chatting about those Volvo campaigns and his Jules Verne attempt with Ellen MacArthur, be sure to give it a listen. It puts a lot of what we're about to hear into context. We pick things up in this part around 2005 as the Volvo Ocean Race moved from the Volvo 60s to the Volvo 70s. And Jason is about to start overseeing the build of a brand new Volvo boat for the newly formed Ericsson team, before heading off on another closely fought Volvo lap of the planet. Before we get started, if you're enjoying what you hear, then head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to use, and your support allows us to stay ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted pods. So a huge thanks for the coffees. It makes a real difference. Right, let's get on with it. Here he is. I hope you enjoy part two of the time I spent with Jason Carrington.
If you get off the boat, you probably won't get back on a boat to do the round the world race. I know it's just a boat and it's just a race, but it's all consuming, you know. The Vendée boats are strong, but there are lots asked of them, and you've only got one guy on them.
By 2005, Jason, you'd already done 3 Volvos and a Jules Verne attempt, and were at Green Marine for the next project. Volvo went from the Volvo 60s that you'd built for the previous edition to the Volvo 70s. Lighter, longer, more sail area, and crucially, the canting keel as well. I mean, how different were the new Volvo boats?
Oh, they were completely different, and we didn't really have, nobody really had experience of those type of boats. The keel systems, the canting keel, the difficulties we had to solve. One of the big ones was the position of the keel axis, which really not a lot of people know that, but there was initially I think the rule said that the axis had to be on the hull surface, and the designers asked for some tolerance. And the rule maker said you could have 150 mil tolerance, which is huge. But as soon as you say that, everyone wants to be up 150 mil. If you go up 150 mil, you essentially need a massive hollow in the hull or a big hole in the hull. And at the time, the rules were you weren't allowed hollows in the hull. So there was a lot of toing and throwing and private interpretations about whether you could put a hollow in. And anyway, the far boats, to cut a long story short, the far boats felt that you couldn't have a hollow in where the keel, which ended up with this sort of big hole in the boat with a sort of sliding plate mechanism. We called it the bomb doors. So all the far boats, Ericsson, Pirates of the Caribbean, Telefonica, and Brazil, I think it was, all had this kind of sliding system, which was very prone to problems, let's say. And when we arrived in Spain for the start of the race and all the boats hauled out, we saw Juan's boat, Avion Ambro, Juan K's boat, with this massive hollow, and there was uproar because it was, how can this be, how is this allowed, At the time, it was a tricky time for Volvo. I think that a lot of Volvo were helping a lot of the teams with money, with sponsorship, and ABN AMRO arguably were probably the only team that really financed it properly. And they'd done a good job. They'd gone to 1K, and to be fair, this was Roy Heiner. He'd picked a good designer with Moose putting it together, and they just had a boat that was so much faster than any other. It wasn't even close. It was knots and knots faster, that boat. So it was another race that was run a bit like EF, but even more so. The race was won before we started, and for us, it was just playing catch up, trying to learn. ABN started very early. They broke keel rams on ABN 1, which became the kids' boat, if you like. So they went through all that. We did all the same thing, but we did it all during the race. So we broke a keel ram on the first leg. We were still having problems with the bomb doors. Pirates blew the bomb doors off on the first night, I think, in the gale in Biscay. So we never really got going on Ericsson. It was difficult, and I think I was guilty a bit of. I think I was so obsessed with saving weight, and in the Volvo 60s, it definitely paid because the boats were so well known and the structures were well known. And again, as I said, everything you save, you put in the bulb. And in the first round of the Volvo 70s, it was the same. Anything you save went in the bulb, and I was so passionate about trying to get that weight in the bulb. But I think we were too pared down in other areas, and that was partly my responsibility. I think, we went for the lightest keel system we could. We went for the lightest deck gear we could, and it wasn't the right thing to do. The boats were, you just needed to be reliable. They were so fast anyway. You just needed to be reliable, and we were never really on the pace. I think we had one good leg where I think we had a second or something, but we weren't really competitive with Ericsson, unfortunately, in that particular race. Yeah.
You built two 70s at Greens, Pirates of the Caribbean for Paul Caird's Disney setup, as you say, and then Ericsson. I mean, what was that? Did it feel like you were really pushing boundaries? I mean, and how different were those two boats?
Well, to be fair, I wasn't that involved with Pirates. I was very involved with Ericsson, and Ericsson was, at the time, the chairman of Ericsson was Carl-Hendrik Suderland, who was also the chairman of Astra Abloy, and we knew him. He's a wonderful guy. So we kind of knew him, and we started that campaign. It was a stutter when we started. We didn't really have, before Ericsson, it was going to be Sony Ericsson. There was never really the money there, and I think Volvo were involved, let's say. So it just never felt quite like we had the resources or or the wherewithal when we started. But we started building that boat at Green Marine, and then when we started it, the boat we didn't know who the sponsor was going to be. Volvo were helping to finance it, as I say. We were kind of working for Volvo a little bit. It didn't feel right. And then we got wind of this pirate, Disney boat, and so suddenly maybe our boat was going to be the Disney boat. For a while, that was the plan. Okay, Disney are going to sponsor it. We didn't know about this Pirates of the Caribbean thing, but Disney would sponsor it. But then we got wind that actually, no, there's going to be another boat. Okay, and our team, including me, a lot, had spent so much effort trying to. I'm not sure we'd done a particularly good job, but we tried to get this boat right. And then we were told, oh, there's a competitor that's going to come and use your mould, use all your drawing, and it just was. How can this be right? It was, from a sportive point of view, it just didn't feel right. And it really knocked us off track because we got so caught up in the fight about that this was wrong, and that this is our yard and these are our ideas, and they're just coming and riding on the back of it. And I think that's where we really went a bit off track. And I think, to be fair to Pirates and Paul, they did a better job. Even though they were after us, they actually did a better job and were more focused on the things that mattered. And we were so bitter, cross about Pirates that we just lost the plot a little bit. So they actually ended up second in that race, which was a real great achievement because they were one of the last to build, and I think we were fourth or fifth. But yeah, it just felt like we were always fighting with reliability issues, things just. Not fast. We didn't have the right rig. It was not great. It was a difficult race, that one.
When the IMOCA 60s started using canting keels, they were beset with problems. I mean, as with any new development, it was a troublesome time. I mean, how much trouble were they, and how much doubt did the canting keels bring with them?
I think it's just because it was a new thing, and people were still, as I said, trying to save weight. It was still all about how light can we make these systems without, we should have been more onto the fact that these are such key systems. They've just got to work. They're the whole performance of the boat, everything about the boat, this has to be reliable. And we kind of, not just us, I mean, everyone missed that a little bit. They should have been, we should have been overbuilding them, and not, so it's the sailors, it's the designers, it was the builders, everyone. I think all these early systems were just not up to the job. but they've developed so much now. And certainly if you look at what goes into an Amoca boat now and the structure, I mean, it's immense. And I think most, if you looked at the last Vendée, I'd imagine that most structural engineers involved in that race or designers would have, if they could wind the clock back before the start, they would happily have thrown 100, maybe 200 kilos of structure into that boat before the start, because it just would have made it faster, more reliable. It was just, that's how it was, you know. And certainly that's, funny enough, I was in Gosport this morning looking at Pip's new boat, and even you look at that, which was the same generation as Alex's previous boat, HB6, you just look at the structure in that boat compared to PRB we've just done. I mean, massive difference, because the loads are bigger, the foils are bigger, they're going faster. I think these designers now are much more looking at, you know, we know these boats slam like crazy. We know how fast they go. They've got to stay in one piece. And how do we achieve that, rather than let's just make it light and fast, you know. Particularly the Vendée, where there are times when you want to be flat out, but a lot of the time you just want to be fast-ish for a good chunk of the time. Yeah.
As you said, Jason, that race was dominated, wasn't it, by Mike Sanderson's ABN AMRO 1. Let's talk a little bit about your campaign with Ericsson. Neil MacDonald was the skipper. You know, what was going on there? What are your overriding memories of that race? And perhaps just describe for us. I mean, we often, we talk about these round the world races as a real kind of happy moment in people's life, but maybe just describe, you know, what it's like being in such a long race when things aren't going well.
Exactly. I mean, it's the complete as I was talking about a few minutes ago with Assa Abloy. When they're going well, it's wonderful. It's the best thing, you know. When they're not going well, it's so hard. So when you're putting so much effort into it, and I mean the whole team, everyone, and you're being rewarded, it's wonderful. I guess it's a bit like climbing Mount Everest. If you get there, it's great, but if you don't quite, it must be quite tough. And when you haven't really got it right, and you're still working just as hard on the boat, you're still cold, you're still wet, you're still frightened some of the time, and you just, you know, and you're every sked you're losing, it's terrible, it's horrible, you know, and you feel you're letting everyone, you feel you're letting people down. You know, everyone's watching it. It's a tough old time for sure, and it just felt with Ericsson, and that certainly wasn't Neil's fault. It was, you know, it was the way that project evolved, and some bad decisions, and it just cast the whole project. That was it. There was nothing we could do about it. We never really came back. Sales were really bad. We had the wrong idea on the sales. It was tough, and I often think back, and you think of, I know Neil was, I think Roy had talked to Neil about Neil skippering ABN AMRO, and Neil had turned that down. I could be. This is what I think happened. And then Neil ended up with Ericsson, and Moose ended up with ABN. And it's funny, I always think of it's a bit like the stock market, you know, after that race, Moose was the man, wasn't he? And of course, Moose is fantastic and all that, but Neil was no worse than he was when he was with Assa Abloy, you know. I'm sure if Neil had been skipper in that boat, or you'd swap boats with whoever was on that boat, you were going to win. I mean, they put it all together. They made all the right decisions. Fair play to them. But it wasn't the skipper. It was just the decisions that you make, for sure. It's always like that. Yeah. The skippers are the icing on the cake. It's building the cake. We had an awful cake.
Well, you're good at cake building. We'll just talk a bit more about that. I mean, you packed a lot in, Jason, by your mid-30s. You come back from your lap of the planet with Ericsson, and what was next once that Volvo campaign was done and dusted?
I think I got off the boat in Brazil. I was, as you were alluding to, and it's true, I was kind of broken, to be honest, and I was really struggling. It's this feeling of letting people down and not being competitive and all that stuff. And I was also pretty much running the shore team as well. I would organise getting the boat out, what needed to happen on the boat, all that stuff. I was worn out, and I just didn't want to sail. I was just like, I just want to get off the boat, really. And I talked to Magnus and said, you know, and Magnus got it completely and said, well, look, just step off, and also, to be honest, I felt this thing again that we really needed on the crew. We didn't really have what I would call a brilliant sail trimmer, like a really expert sail trimmer. And at the same time, when I got off the boat, we'd also John Kostecki came in to sort of to take over from Neil, which again wasn't really fair, but it was, I guess they had to do something. So John came in as the skipper. Neil stayed on board, as of course he should. But I felt that with John coming in, that he should bring someone with him that he trusted, and of course one of his great mates and sailing colleagues was Ross Halcrow. So Ross came on, and Ross was great because he kind of, even though the sail program was a mess, he took about trying to improve it with what we had. It was difficult because you have only so many sails you can build, but together they definitely helped. So that was good. So I think the crew was definitely, I hate to say it, but it was kind of bolstered by me getting off in a way. And then John did a couple of legs, I think, or maybe only one leg, I'm not sure. And then Neil went back to being the skipper. Kenny Reid joined the boat, and they had a better. The end of the race was much better. Sails were a bit more sorted out. I think Ross Halcrow might have stayed all the way to the end. And I felt after that, I remember talking to Chris. I phoned Chris Law from Brazil and said, Chris, I think I'm going to get off the boat. I just can't. I'm just really struggling. And Chris said, Jason, if you get off the boat, you probably won't get back on a boat to do the round the world race. And I sort of think I felt then, that's all right. And of course I didn't after that. And I don't really regret that. I think I'd done enough of them, and I was, by this stage, I'd sort of seen another path of something I was interested in and enjoying and felt I could help with. So it was okay. But it was definitely the end of Ericsson was tough for sure. Yeah. I know it's just a boat and it's just a race, but it's all consuming,
You went back to Greens. A few after that.
Did I? No. I know what I did. Halfway around in Melbourne, I met with Alex Thomson. He was having dinner next to me, and I had a short chat with Alex he was talking about doing a new mocha boat. So after Ericsson, we built a boat. We built the Fino boat for Alex in Lymington. We set up a shed with Neville Hutton actually, and we built a boat for him. So that was 2007, 2008. But we worked a bit with Green Marine. They built the rudders for it, and so there was definitely a kind of a joint thing there. But yeah, that's what I did. Put a team together and built the boat, and some of those guys are still here today. We built that boat. Yeah.
How easy or difficult a decision was it to start up under your own name?
To be honest, I wouldn't have done it. I always was anxious about the overhead and the responsibility and keeping it all going, and so it wasn't. It's something people often ask me, why don't you do a boatyard? Why do you keep going to these? Because there was a period after building Alex's Fino boat, I'd spend a lot of time. I went to Persica and looked after Ian Walker's boat for Abu Dhabi, built that there. A lot of Nicholas's boats. I was sort of the project manager, if you like, or build manager at other yards. And often people say, well, why don't you just have the boatyard? I don't know, I just wasn't keen. And then I was just in Italy one particular day, my phone rang and it was Laurie Smith. And Laurie said, oh, hey, Jay, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I'm in Italy. He said, let's have a boat. Why don't we do a boatyard? He'd said this to me before many years ago. He said, let's have a boatyard. I think it would be good. We'll do it together. And because I was at a stage where I didn't really know, I was a bit like, what am I going to do? This project managing of builds was good and it was quite lucrative. But I was away a lot and I had a young family, and I just thought I'd be quite happy to just be in Lymington more and more. So it was quite appealing. So I sort of said to Laura, well, maybe let's meet. So I came back, we met, and that was kind of the start of it, really. It all came together. It was, I think at the time I was sailing with Peter Morton on his Fast 40 and loving it. I'd gone back to doing a bit of sailing and was just loving the boats, loving the racing. It was in the heyday of the Fast 40s. And Tim Powell phoned me up out of the blue, and I said to Tim, Tim, you've got to get one of these Fast 40s. They're fantastic. And he said to me, well, that's why I'm ringing you. Would you would you be interested in building one for us, or where could we build one? And I said, well, actually, Laurie's just mentioned about setting up a yard. What do you think? And that was the start of it. And obviously Laurie was brilliant, but Nicholas was wonderful too, and Tim, because we didn't have a shed. I said to Tim, yep, we'll do it. I phoned Laurie, said, yep, we're on. We've got a boat to build. We need a shed. This shed at the time was with Green Marine, but Green Marine were having a difficult time. Nicholas paid a deposit so we could order materials with no shed organised, no contract, nothing. And then we went about getting this shed, and of course Laurie's brilliant at that. I mean, Laurie owns the site, but he knew Green Marine were in a jam, so he kind of phoned Green Marine and said, round his big oak table, he phoned them and said, what are you doing with Unit 2? Do you want to, I'll let you off the lease. You know, they were in the lease, and he said, you can leave it if you want, knowing they were having a tough time, but you have to make a decision in 5 minutes. And the guy said, I won't tell you who it was, but he said, well, I'll have to think about that. And Laurie said, well, call me back. You've got 5 minutes. But Laurie said, they'll go for it. Don't worry. Phone rang back. Okay, you can have it. And that was it. We were in here. But an empty shed. We came into the empty shed, and then about the same time, Green Marine ceased trading, which was sad. You know, we got a long history with Green Marine and all the people there, and although Bill and Ian weren't there anymore, I was still very sad about it. But it did, because Laurie owned the whole site, Laurie managed to do a very good deal with basically buying everything from Green Marine. So we bought all the kit from Green Marine, which was just there. and even more importantly, we got all the guys. You know, we got a lot of people that I was already getting feelers out for, but it was tough when they were already working somewhere else. Suddenly they were ready to come. So we got our initial 10 guys. We got all the kit from next door, and we were, I think within 2 months, we were building Nicholas's boat. So that was 2017. Yeah. But for sure, I wouldn't have done it without Laurie suggesting it.
Having watched Green Marine, which was a thriving company, fail like that, did it feel like a bit of a risk?
Yeah, it did feel like a huge risk, and it still does. You know, I worry about it. I worry about that. I worry about the money. It's not my biggest worry, but it is a worry, and keeping the guys busy, and just knowing and feeding the overhead. You know, the overheads, to build these type of boats, you need a certain amount of space, and you need a certain amount of kit, and it's expensive, and it's impossible to link all the projects up. You just can't. It's not like you get this boat's going to fit there, the next one comes. It doesn't work like that. So you tend to go like Billy-O, and then you stop and you fall off a cliff, and then you get going again, or you try not to do that, but it's inevitable sometimes. And certainly with the whole COVID thing, we definitely had a bit of that. It was very tough, and you've still got to pay the rent, even though Laurie's the landlord. He's also a very hard businessman, so we've still got to pay the rent. We've still got to keep the team together, you know. So it was, yes, it really worries me for sure. And we've got the same thing now. We've got, you know, projects that we know about, and projects that might be in the future, but how firm are they, trying to get them all, you know, it's very difficult. And the guys don't really get it, and I completely understand why they don't get it, because I didn't when I was doing their job. You know, they're like, well, we're too busy. Oh, we don't have enough of it. It's like, oh God, it's never perfect, you know. It's I think every boatyard has the same problem. Yeah.
How competitive is this marketplace, Jason? I mean, there can't be many yards that can build to this spec, can there?
No, I really don't think there are. I think it's a handful. I mean, I often think, you know, if someone said to me, we're going to, you know, Jason, you're going to have a yacht built, but you're not allowed to be involved. You're just going to have it built. You're not allowed to see it being built. Just choose someone to build it, or somewhere to build it. It's not that easy, you know. And so, I guess if you ask me that now, I would be quite happy at Persico, because I know them so well. Mark's a really good friend of mine. Marcello's a good friend of mine. So I just know they wouldn't do anything bad for me. And we do work together. They've made bits for us, and we've made bits for them. And it's the same thing. We'd always try to do a brilliant job, but you know, when you're sending it to your friends, it's got to be perfect. We've always wanted it to be perfect. So I'd go there, or otherwise, you know, there's individuals who could do it. Paul Quinn, you know, Killian Bush, Richard Gillies, these sort of people. But there's not many yards. I think a lot of the French yards are very good now, but we've worked a bit with some of them, but there's 5 or 6 in the world, really. I think. And a lot of teams, you do see some of America's Cup teams setting up and doing it themselves, but they're not. It's still basically yard people that have put it together. So we could do that, or someone else could do that, but it's nigh on impossible to start from nothing. You can put all the infrastructure in there, but it's the systems, the processes, who does what, that's such a battle. Yeah.
I like that you mentioned Persico. Persico is a huge yard in northern Italy. Actually, I went there for the first time before Christmas. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? It's a whole town.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Is Persico, and I think they started building bits for the automotive industry.
Perino was a tool maker. He made little tools, if you like, for molding bits or making bits, and it just grew and grew. And like you say, it is like the whole of Nembro. And they've got any building that's to do with Persico's got a red band around it, and you notice there's a lot of red bands in Nembro.
Right, Jason, let's talk a bit about boat design. I often ask skippers on this podcast how lucky they feel to have been sailing at this period of time, with wings, foiling, of course, foiling offshore as well. From a design perspective, how exciting have the last few decades been?
Oh, it's been huge. I mean, the development's been massive, and certainly for the designers, but also for the builders. I think the builders have really had to. It's been a massive step up. You can't. I can't express strongly enough how much harder it's got. How much more input you need from the teams and the designers, and it's very much a joint venture now. Certainly, when I remember back doing my apprenticeship, we didn't have internet or anything then. You used to get a roll of drawings come, and you'd lofting, and you'd loft it out, and you'd build the boat. You never talk to you just do it, and you'd make a lot of decisions yourself. You can't really do that anymore. You've got to be a lot more careful, and they've got to be a lot more involved. I mean, we're fortunate here. We got Tara Trouser, who's French, so without her, I don't know how we'd cope with the Amoca boats. You have to have that kind of connection, and you're on the phone every day, really, and a lot of meetings to review how you're going to make it. And it's none of it's easy. It's very tricky drawings, tricky structures, and and this is sort of coming on to, I said to you, it's not my biggest worry, the financial thing, but I know what happens to those boats, and it's just, that's what worries me. What worries me is what we do here has an impact on one of our boats or the people on it, even worse. That's what keeps me awake at night for sure, whether it's, the Vendée Globe or the America's Cup, because you just know these boats are, the Vendée boats are strong, but they're so beat. There are lots asked of them, and you've only got one guy on them. And then, the Cup boats they're so light. I mean, it's mad. You look at the structures, you look at the skins, and it's just, wow, is that okay? It's not like they've got massive safety factors and everything. They can't have. They've just got to, how strong does it need to be? Okay, let's make it that strong plus a tiny bit. I mean, the benefit of the Cup boats is that we fully structurally test them. I mean, the boats are, when we finish the boat's rolled over and we put load through all the different systems, which is incredible. And they've got the budget to do that. And actually, you have to do it for the America's Cup. So the boat's set up on the mast step, upside down in a shed, dead quiet, middle of night, and we just go through all the different loads on all the different parts of the boat, the runners, the main sheet, all the different systems in the boat. The foil arms, and you load it up with big hydraulic rams, and it's a very anxious time. But when you've done it, you're like, oh, that's brilliant, because you kind of know that the boat's seen that load, and it's seen it in a really unfriendly environment, pinned to the floor. At least when it's sailing, it's all kind of moving around. There's a bit of give, so you definitely have more confidence after that. You don't really get the Amoca don't have that kind of budget really, so it doesn't happen so much. So that is definitely the most worrying thing for me. And it's a double-edged sword, the fact that I've done all the sailing, I know what they do. If you don't know, you don't have to worry about it.
Let's talk a bit more about specifically offshore. I mean, you famously built the last iteration of Alex Thomson's Amoca, Hugo Boss, and a radical design, fully foiling, obviously. How was that project? How difficult to build was that?
It was very difficult. It was our second boat after Ran, but certainly going to an Amoca boat is just another world. All the there's so many systems, the canting keel systems we talked about, the foil structures. Oh my goodness, it's immense. It takes months to build and assemble the foil structure. It's so big, and there's so much integration into the hull. So this takes, and inevitably the designers want a lot of time on it because they want to decide on the foil shape, and the foil shape has a big impact on the foil boxes. So it's always pushed back late, and it's something that's, we certainly with Alex's boat, we were still working on the foil structure as it went out the door. We'd started months before, and Kevin's the same really. The last thing we were working on was the foil box that linked the two foil boxes together. So you've got that foil structure, which is probably the biggest headache. Then you've got all the ballast system, which is huge, the keel systems, and then all the tricky stuff that each skipper wants, and they're also individual. Particularly Alex's boat was, very individual. So they're very tricky, but they're a lot of fun. And certainly working with Alex as a friend, and it's always fun to work with Alex because he is so pioneering. I think he's always been pioneering, and I do, there's always people that question what he's doing, but I think you're seeing more and more that enclosed cockpit is the way to go, and you're going to see more and more of it for sure. You already are. So he's quite a trendsetter, and he's fun to work with. So we hope his retirement's short. You can't walk around the boat. You are literally strapped in, quite often with a crash helmet on. It's incredible. The paint, we weigh the paint. We know exactly how much paint it is per square metre. We know how much we sand off every time we key it up. I wouldn't want to suddenly have to build a Formula One car, and I don't think a Formula One builder would suddenly want to build a America's Cup boat.
We discussed canting keels and the problems they bring. Let's talk reliability. When you're building a boat that essentially needs to fly, but it's going out in the Southern Ocean, a sea state that, of course, you've witnessed firsthand, how big a compromise is there between strength and then weight? It must be an impossible balance to get right.
It's very difficult, and I must say I really feel for the designers now. I think it's very hard because particularly in the IMOCA world, they're built around an ISO rule, but to match the ISO rule is everyone's going to do that anyway. You kind of got to go beyond it. So as soon as you're going beyond it, you're probably wondering, well, how much beyond it are they going? How much are we throwing more weight than? It's difficult, and I think that's certainly the last cycle for the Vendée. I think there was quite a bit of that going on. How much stronger do we make the boat, or do we need to be light? You need the boat to lift up on the foil, so you want a light boat, but it needs to stay in one piece. And as I said, I do think in hindsight, I suspect most of those designers, certainly the builders, would have said, gosh, I wish there was another 100, 200 kilos of carbon in there. It would go a long way. And actually, would it, in terms of performance? I don't think it's... And as I said, PRB has been an evolving boat. Because it started life as an ocean race boat, it's been in the shed for a couple of years. It's still one of the latest hull shapes and all the rest of it, but then Kevin Escoffier took over it. And just in the time we were building it, the amount of modifications, more structure, which we completely get and we agree with, but they're learning a lot. So the boats are a lot stronger than they were before. Yeah. And have you sailed on one? Have you sailed with Alex at all? Or, they're crazy. It's absolutely mad. You cannot comprehend the load.
What's it like?
How do you describe it? You can't stand up still. You have to be braced once the thing's up and in any kind of seaway. I'm not talking about a gale, like 15 knots and a bit of a seaway. You can't walk around the boat. You are literally strapped in, and quite often with a crash helmet on. It's incredible. Just the jolting when they come off the foils. They're insane. I just got a massive amount of admiration for those people that sail those boats. It's incredible. They are just brutal on the people on the boats. I think that is probably whether it's the boat that's the limiting factor or just the person on the boat, it probably is the person. There's a point where you just can't take any more, I'm sure when you need to go to the toilet, you're going to need to slow down. If you need to cook something, you've got to slow down. You can't just be at full bore all the time. Yeah, they're incredible.
It must be hard for you personally, because you know what it's like down south. I've never sailed there. I don't know what it's like. So you know what's going to hit them. And yet, especially someone like Alex, who's always pushing the design envelope, and it's part of the thing he loves about what he does. But yet, you know what's going to hit them. I can imagine personally, it's quite a difficult marriage.
It's very difficult. Yeah, I as I said, that's for me, without a doubt, that's the hardest thing about what we're doing here, and it's only really me here that feels that. The guys are all great, and and they all work very hard, and they all know how important it is to follow the drawing and try to get it right. But it's me that has to sort of live with it, if you like, and think about it all the time. And I do, because it's not so much that the Southern Ocean is just cold and it's windy. I mean, you've been in windy places before. I think I've been in a windy place. Do you remember that trip on Ep? That was pretty awful, wasn't it? Windy and wild, but at least you're quite relatively close to shore or other boats. The thing down there, you're just on your own, really. I mean, the Vendée, the only help you got is other boats, like what happened to Kevin, and then when we all heard about that, we all go, oh God, because you just know he's on his own, really. The only help he's going to get is from someone else. So that's why the Southern Ocean is so sort of daunting, I think. It's not that, of course it's windy and it's wild and it's the best sailing you'll ever do, but it's just so remote, If it goes wrong, you really are on your own.
Are you glued to the tracker when the race is on?
Yeah, I am, yeah. I know I don't like to be, but I am. Of course I am. You follow it and, I am, for sure.
Alex has a somewhat tempestuous relationship with the Vendée, doesn't he? I mean, this last Vendée, just 3 weeks in, and irreparable rudder damage saw him retire. How does that feel back here, knowing the man hours that have gone into a yacht like Hugo Boss?
Well, I think it's always going to be something like the Vendée is, it's not a given. It's certainly not a given that you're going to win or be in the top three. It's not it's not a given that you're going to finish. And it's, I think for sure, as we were saying earlier, it's just the preparation. You just need to have more time. And I think this last cycle, that's particularly true. The boats are, if you wind the clock back a bit, the previous generation weren't quite as wild. The ones before the foiling, well, they're certainly not, they're going 10 knots slower. So the loads on the boats are a lot less. So they're learning a lot. Like, I think, I shouldn't talk for others, but I'm sure it would be interesting. That would be a good podcast to talk to someone like Guillaume Verdier or VPLP about. I'm sure for them it's a big concern, is just where is that line? How strong should it be? What is the load? So yes, of course, we want whatever boat we build, whether it's the Fast 40, the America's Cup, we want it to go out the blocks and win. That's what we want. It's so tough when it doesn't. We all live with the guys, So yeah, not easy.
This is slightly different though, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned Kevin Escoffier being dramatically rescued by Jean Le Cam. And although, you didn't build that boat, and just in that instance, it wasn't your responsibility. But, how responsible do you feel as a builder when things like that happen?
Oh, completely. I mean, you never know. A lot of these things, you never know what's gone wrong. Why is it happen? Is it is it a design thing, or is it a build thing, or is it what the sailor's done, or is it just bad luck, or have they hit something? Or it's the worst thing about the job, for sure. And unfortunately for me, I think having that background it makes it a bit worse. I really don't enjoy that, the worrying about it. We have a little process document we have here, and I've done a sort of an introduction, and I try to say that, and I try to say we got to follow the instructions. If you're not sure, ask. And it's very true that if we get something wrong, it can have an impact, a terrible impact. So yeah, it's a worry.
Let's talk a bit about the French IMOCA world. As you say, you've been working with Kevin here on the new PRB, but it's an amazing world, isn't it? The designers, the yards. What was it like working with Kevin and being part of that?
Well, it was very different from Alex. Is obviously English, and I get his sense of humour, and he's a friend. I had not met Kevin before, but I warmed to him straight away because he's very technical. I mean, a lot of the French sailors are, but he's particularly technical. he knows how to build boats. He knows how to design boats. So his first visit here was fun, and he's got a good sense of humour. He's pretty funny. The first time he came. I did a barbecue at home, and he came and he told us about the rescue which was all amazing, And he tells a good story, and it's great. And really, really good. But they do have this. It's so strong, that French Amoca world. They all help each other. It's very hard to get an Amoca boat built out of France. Because I think there's tax incentives to do it in France, but equally, the main thing is it's just all so concise. All the designers are next to the builders, which is a huge advantage. So they all, this link I was talking about, it's just there. So you can see why they stay in France. Like, I honestly think that I would say this, I think we build a nice boat, I think if you went on one of our boats and a French boat, this is a bit probably in trouble here, aren't I? But I think you'll notice the difference. I think a Carrington Boats boat will be immaculate. I think Persico boat is immaculate. Maybe there's a cost thing there, I don't know, but I think it's more just a philosophy of how you do it. I think the French, there is a, and they might be right, to be fair, but there's very much a philosophy as it's good enough. It's good enough. You know what I mean? It's strong enough. It's good enough. That's what it is. Whereas I'm much more like, that's got to be perfect. Why is it not perfect? Why is that not straight? There's a gap there, refit it, whatever. I don't think that happens much in a lot of yachts.
You want to be proud of it, though.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Let's talk foiling then. It's a fairly obvious answer, I guess, but from a boat builder's perspective, what are the biggest issues with building fully foiling offshore yachts?
I think it's the time frame of, as I mentioned before, the time frame of building all that stuff. Not the foils in them. So we haven't really built many foils here, but the foils take anything up to 12 weeks to build. So it's a massive. You've got to commit quite early to get your foils in time for your boat, and that's tough because they're developing very quickly. There's different ideas, so you're kind of pushing. The team and the builder really are like pushing for the information. The designer's like, well, I'm not, this is so crucial to get it right. And a lot of decisions, where do you want to be? Do you want a good all-round boat? Alex was particularly wanting to be good VMG downwind. It's just knowing where you want to be and then making that decision and then getting the drawings out and then making the parts. And that's a huge challenge when you've got your deadline of when you're supposed to finish the boat. And it is like, we think it's kind of from getting the drawings, we think it's, it's close to 6 months from getting the drawings to building the parts to getting them in the boat. So you need them quite early, but they don't want to give them to you. So, and an Amoca boat is, we think it's 14, 15 months to build an Amoca boat from hull lines. So say 3 months to build the mold and then another 11, 12 months to put the boat together. It's a big, it's a lot of hours and a lot of energy, and getting that information early, particularly with the foil, is always a challenge. Yeah.
Do you wish they'd been around, Jason, when you were racing?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've loved my sailing with Alex. I've only been sailing short. I've sailed on his old boat and the new boat, and it was incredible. I just loved it. And I think I went sailing with Ineos the day you went sailing with Ineos, and I mean, it's just, of course, I would like to be around that. And I often think, Ben will get cross with me, but I do think, when you talk about that cake, I think particularly the America's Cup, it's all about the design's got to be right. If you're not right with it, you forget it. You can build the nicest boat in the world. You can put the best sailors on in the world. You're not going to be competitive. You have to get the design right. You've got to have a boat that's as fast as at least as fast as everyone else's. Otherwise, forget it. And I do sort of think when we went sailing with Ben there, I think, I still think I could get fit enough to wind those handles and do a race or two. You know what I mean? I think you can. I think that part of the cake, for sure, Ben is the wonderful icing, and there's not many like that. But I think there are sailors. To me, the sailors is not the hardest bit to find. I think it's getting it's the design and getting the structure within the design group that you make the right decision. Cross the T's, dot the I's, but don't go off on these crazy loads of energy into something that doesn't get you anywhere or doesn't get you very much. I think that's where the New Zealanders are so strong that they just, this is important, this isn't. Let's focus on that. It's time and time again they do that. It's quite a good quote that Andy Claughton said once. Don't spend too long looking for the pepper in the sawdust. And I think it's very easy to do that.
I've not heard that before. That's very good.
Yeah.
As you say, you built Ben Ainslie's AC75 right here, and probably a totally different proposition to working with Alex. What was that like, building the America's Cup yacht? I mean, was it the hardest thing you'd ever had to do? And what did you think when you first saw that AC75 announcement?
I think like many people, I thought no way, it's never going to work. Not being a designer, it just looked crazy to me. But of course, quite quickly, the little test boats came out and it was, yes, it's going to work. And we just loved being involved in it. It was so exciting. The new class was exciting, but then when it came to building the boat, it's fantastic because it is just so, there's nothing like it. The processes, the materials, the lack of the materials, the weight, the weight management, you've got to nail all that stuff. And it's really exciting, and it's happening so fast. There's lots of changes. We were fortunate because we'd started Switchback, which became PLB, Kevin's boat, and when for reasons, well, I won't go into that, but that project stalled for a while, and we had quite a lot of labour on that boat, and we'd just started RB2, and I remember Grant Simmer sat right there looking at me saying, "Jason, this RB2 cannot be late. It cannot be," and I completely get it. Of course it can't be late. And I said, "That's fine, Grant, but we have to have loads of labour, just too much labour to react to anything." And he said, "Fine, whatever you need." So we didn't lose any labour when Switchback stopped. We just kept all the guys. So in theory, we had too many guys for the hours we thought it would take, but actually it was perfect. We had a night shift running pretty much from day one to the finish. So 24 hours a day we were working here, with management of that night shift, and it's the only way to do it. But it's a huge challenge, they're wonderful, wonderful boats to build, yeah, and just such light skins, which is all. These boats are difficult to build anyway. When you get into these such light skins, and it's how you process them, it's very easy to make mistakes again, or not, or just because it's new, so you have to test all that stuff. What weight glue film can we get away with? Are we going to get the air out? Is it going to golf ball? How do we deal with that? And what bonding do we need? And it goes on and on. Is it porous because it's so thin? Is the whole boat going to be porous? This sort of thing. But really exciting boats.
I love that you're smiling when you're telling us all of this. I mean, it's right up your street, isn't it? It's all about precision and detail, getting the line straight.
Yeah. I love it. And also just it's trying not to be boring, but these boats are pre-preg, so the resin's already in the fibre, and you have a resin content that you start with, and you have to bleed a certain amount of resin out to get the air out. And there's on an America's Cup boat, on a hull, we might have 4 or 5 different bleed stacks, which is, because we're so onto, or so careful not to bleed too much resin. Like we know we can have a bit less resin in the back end of the boat, but we need a bit more in the slamming and the front end of the boat, all that stuff. The paint, we weigh the paint, we know exactly how much paint it is per square meter. We know how much we sand off every time we key it up. I can ask Tara any time during the build of RB2, what does that boat weigh? And she'll tell me within 2 kilos what the boat weighs, of a boat that's 1,600 kilos. It's amazing how on it you have to be, because you can't deliver the boat late, but also you can't deliver the boat and go, "Sorry guys, it's 50 kilos heavy."
Do you mind?
Yes.
Well, Ben got off to a shaky start early on in Auckland. I think we can all remember watching that. But it was great for a while, wasn't it? I mean, how did it feel seeing your hull winning race after race in the Prada Cup in New Zealand? What was that like watching from home?
Yeah, it's so exciting, isn't it? And everyone gets behind it, and it's of course it's wonderful. And you don't really think about it until they get there, but then you start to think, and I say it to the guys quite often, when, again, we were talking about getting it right and just check. We have very good process sheets tick through and follow, but at the same time, just be careful. But and I do say, look, imagine this. They could win the America's Cup. Imagine it. It's if they're there, it's possible. I know. Again, you've got to get the cake right, but if you're in the game, it's possible, and to be part of that is fantastic. It's a real opportunity, and we definitely get that, and we're very privileged to get the chance, to work with them, and let's. We want to be. We feel we can contribute a lot this time too. We know we are a big slice of that cake. Of course, there's the rig and there's the sales and there's the management and the money and all the rest of it. The sailors, the fitness, all that stuff. But you've just got to get each one of those right, and we've got to make sure we get our bit right.
How does it work? I mean, once you've handed the hull over, is that it, or are you still part of the process? I mean, do you know, for example, what their initial issues were down in Auckland? Were you involved in that?
Yeah, we are involved. I mean, we're quite friendly with the team, and of course, particularly the structural engineers. They've become friends, and we know them very well. So certainly, if it's something to do with a structure, we'll talk to them, because we have all the records of how it was built, what was there. I mean, they've got the drawings, but we've actually got the processes, all the photos. So there's a bit of communication there, but we sort of lose touch a little bit. We don't really know what's going on. So we kind of, I keep in touch with Ben on WhatsApp, and I did, I obviously said after that, when they did well again, I was like, it's great, and I could sense that it was great, but I think he knew that there were some issues that they were going to have, I think the writing was on the wall, which is tough, isn't it? After all that effort, and we feel that too, we're like, oh, come on. Come on, guys. It's like, it's not easy.
You've got to get the cake right, as you've said.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the AC-75, a foiling monohull? I mean, as a race machine, we'll be seeing more of them in the next Cup, obviously. What are your thoughts on the AC-75 as a Cup boat?
Well, I think it's wonderful. I mean, you were there. It's a question I should be asking you, really. But from an observer, I was getting up in the middle of the night to watch it, just because it was so exciting. I thought it was fantastic. I love the pre-start. I love oh God, they're going to come off the foils. It just adds a whole lot to it. And I don't care for me, compared to just big heavy boats plodding upwind at 9, 10 knots, it's pretty hard. It's pretty dull, I think. It's dynamic. It's exciting. I think all the teams, certainly from the last Cup, all of them did an incredible just to get there. There's so many people. You read this stuff, people with opinions, but honestly, just to get there from a new rule and to be reliable is incredible. And to be as close as they were, actually, they were all the boats were pretty close. They were, of course, the Kiwis had an edge, and Prada had an edge in that lighter air as well. But it wasn't like it was night and day. They were all pretty close. Yeah, and I think this next event, they'll be closer, because everyone knows the boat. Everyone knows where you need to be with the foils a little bit. They're going to be more similar, so it should be even more exciting, I hope.
I'm curious, Jason, and Ben is now significantly partnered with an F1 team. Alinghi has announced a partnership with Red Bull. How transferable is that knowledge? Is it a good thing to have that input in the design and build of a Cup boat, or do you think it could be a distraction?
I don't. Well, of course, I don't really know. An opinion would be, I imagine it could be a bit of both. I think it must be a massive resource that you can tap into, and they've got such a resource there, such clever people, and I think I'm sure they'll help with the whole management of the team, and trying to get these, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, getting the important things right. But I do. Part of me worries that it's Formula One cars are not boats. They're very different. Just for me, that worries me a little bit. I think you could go off track. It's in Alinghi doing it as well. I mean, I think as long as you've got someone strong there, or strong management picking out the good bits and not going off track, then I think it could be good. But I do think you've got to be careful not to. I always say to people, you think of no one turns a blind eye when you hear that Mercedes will help design the Cup boat, and these Formula One car guys are going to do this for the boat. But if I said to you, Juan K and Guillaume Verdier, they're doing the new Mercedes, you go, what? You must be kidding. Yeah, and Jason, you're going to build it. Oh, right, okay. but Formula, everyone thinks, oh, Formula One, it must be amazing, whatever you're doing. But I'm not. I think you'll be careful of that. It's not a Formula One car.
My next question is, are the Formula One teams at the real pinnacle build-wise? I mean, I guess in some ways, of course, building cars they are.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything that you look at there and think, oh, I'd love a bit of access to that for boat building?
Yeah, I mean, I've not been up to Mercedes. We were I've worked quite a bit in the past with GTR, who build a lot of parts for Formula One cars, and I remember going there the first time, and you see a lot of what they make, and you look at it and you think, how did they make that? It's so intricate and shapes. And I would say, how did you make that? I just don't get it. How do you make something it's so sculptured, so fine, and so beautiful? How did you? I just can't. And there are tricks, and you learn how they did it. But equally, they come here and just see the scale of I remember Gareth from GTR coming in when we were building one of the boats and seeing the hull in the oven. He was like, "Whoa, wow, this is huge! How do you cook this?" And we're dealing with, typically in the Formula One, that the cars is a lot of very light fibres, very thin cores. We've got thicker cores, still very light fibres, but not compared to them. So they're different beasts, I'd say. So I'm sure, I think they are very good at what they do. Of course, some of it's transferable, but they're definitely differences. I wouldn't want to suddenly have to build a Formula One car, and I don't think a Formula One builder would suddenly want to build a America's Cup boat.
We're all looking forward, aren't we, to what's next? Everyone wants the next thing. And you've seen a lot in your time as a boat builder. Where do you think things are heading?
I guess this foiling thing's going to keep going, and certainly in the mocha world. And I imagine you're going to end up with elevators on the rudders too at some point, so they're fully foiling. I hope the America's Cup keeps going in the same direction. Whether it will tailor down to normal boats, I don't know. I mean, I think there's with these, they're quite complex, these boats. So just to keep them going, you need a big team. So that I think that kind of rules it out. And also just the sheer speed of them and the potential for, I mean, that's something I watched a lot in watching it in Auckland. You just think, wow, if they just get that dip wrong, it's going to be in half. That I don't see that's going to, you're going to see all these boats whistling around the Solent or doing Cows Week, or I can't see that. But I hope at the top end it just keeps going, and I'm sure new materials will arrive and new processes. It's quite a slow thing. It's not like that. I can't think of where we've had a game changer recently where we're like, wow, we have to do that, this new material or this new process. It's always evolving, and it's different for every boat you do. It's not like we've got a cure cycle. I generally write a different cure cycle for every big cure we do, because it's different every time. Something is slightly different, the laminate, or there's a mix of resin systems, or the cores are different thickness, or everything's a bit different. And I'm sure that's still going to be the case. But I love that. I think it's cool. It's exciting.
What about you? When you see that AC75 foiling around, or see an Imoca 60 charging around the Southern Ocean, you must feel quite proud. What's been your greatest achievement in this sport, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I look back at some of the sailing, and I talked to you earlier about that Aster Abloy when it was just one leg, but that leg where we barreled up the French coast, and I really felt that was because the boat had a bigger bulb, and that was because of what we did, and so I influenced it, and I really I think that's cool, and I do think that Aster Abloy was quite a groundbreaking boat. I think after that, everyone paid more attention to the build of their boats, and it's become more and more finite, if you like, and detailed. So that's good. And as a sailor, I don't know. I never. Of course, I loved doing all that stuff, and I love talking about it and thinking back at the friendships and the moments that were, scary moments, but exciting moments with your mates and just things that you never will see again. You know, that's fantastic. But I think right now I'm very proud of the team we've got here that we've managed to put together. You know, with obviously Laurie being the backbone of getting it all going, but you know, Mike, Tara, Connell, the guys on the shop floor, everyone, they just. I really feel now that I feel very confident that we can do very cool stuff. You know, it takes time, and we've only been going as our little company only for I think it's our 5th year. But I do feel nothing scares me. Don't get me wrong, I'm still scared about what happens to the boats. But in terms of making it, I think we have got such a talented team. We can do it. You know, you look at some things coming in. Wow, that's pretty tricky to build, but we find a way and we build it, and I'm very pleased about that. And that's not me, that's them. And then it is, you know, again, it's very hard to find guys like that and girls like that who've got that talent. You know, it's quite rare at such a high level. You know, there's building boats and there's building boats, but these type of boats, you've got to be very good at what you do. And they're often not, you know, they're not in the spotlight, but they should be, really. Yeah.
Looking back, it's been an amazing career. What, if anything, would you have done differently?
I'm not sure that I would have done much differently. I might have, maybe I should have gone with Magnus on EF. But no, I you know, the silk cut thing was wonderful in its own ways, and it was a very. That particular time was that so much was evolving, new halyard locks and the Code Zeros, and that was all our group. You know, Roger Scammell, Hercules Engineering, Neil MacDonald, all these people that was Neil Graham. You know, it was an exciting time developing these things, which now you see everywhere, and I feel that's a cool thing to have been involved in and seen. You know, yeah.
Jason Carrington, it's been fascinating. All the best with whatever comes up next. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Heartfelt words from a man that's played a hugely important role in putting performance yacht racing where it is today. Jason, a big thanks for that wonderful insight into a remarkable career. You know we love to hear from you, so let me know what you think. Like, review and subscribe on whatever platform you join us on. And if you're enjoying the podcast, buy us a coffee. It's easy to do. buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. Helping us bring you uninterrupted, ad-free chat from the leading lights in the sport of sailing. Tim at Vertigo Films actually makes these pods the lovely things they are, editing and producing each one with love and care. So a big thanks to Tim. Keep in touch via social media. I'm Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, and Shirley Robertson on Facebook. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
Oh, that's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10-5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.